666. It's a number that strikes fear in some, anxiety in others. The beast that gives his mark to his people in Revelation. The beast is the image, the symbol of the earthly, worldly powers that rule our world, as well as the spiritual forces of evil behind them. And the beasts that come calling forth worship and putting a mark on their followers stand in contrast to those that are sealed and set apart by God. So let's dive into this mark of the beast and see what new perspectives, new facets to this really famous image has for us today. Revelation 13, starting in again at verse 16. The beast causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or on the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the code of a man, and his number is 666. So we're coming at it again, this famous image of the mark of the beast, this number 666. And I want to start by actually taking us back to the very first paragraph of Revelation in chapter 1, verse 3. The book is described by John as a prophecy that we're supposed to read, listen to, and keep what is written in it. He says, "Blessed is the one who reads this prophecy, who hears what is written and keeps to it." And so there's this has been helpful for me, especially this last year going through Revelation again, that all of this is actually supposed to be incredibly practical. And this one is one, it's so symbolic and so strange. It's hard to know how would this actually impact my daily life. But so in the last episode, we already worked through some of these details. What's been going on is there's this image of this anti-Trinity. You have this first beast that comes who has a mortal wound and yet is healed. And then the second beast comes who has the authority of the first beast and makes others worship the beast. And this beast looks like a lamb but speaks like a dragon. And they even have the image of the beast who has the breath of the life of the beast in it. And really, there's in so many ways, it looks like what you would expect to see from God, from Jesus. It looks like a lamb, but it speaks like a dragon. And that's one of the ways that the enemy deceives so many in the world, is by actually putting forth this distorted parallel. And actually in the same way that the saints, the people of God, are marked by God. We're going to look at that. But we've seen in chapter 7, you have the 144,000. And they show up again, but they are sealed by God. And here you have the people who worship the beast. So there's really this contrast between those that are following Jesus and sealed by him, and those that are following the beast and sealed by the beast. So let's go a little deeper into what this number might even mean. There is a pretty common view that this number 666 stands for Nero Caesar. And really, up until recently, I would have bet my money on this one. And I'm still maybe 30 to 40% sure that it's him. But if it references a single human individual, Nero is maybe top of the list. His human beings throughout time loved to look for codes and find patterns, but in even ancient Jewish practice, they would take their numbers or letters, turn them into numbers, and use those as codes for names and things like that. And so in the Greek, it's a little convoluted to get there, but the basic idea is that if you take the letters of Nero Caesar and you transpose them into numbers, you're going to get the number 666. Now, throughout history, people have tried to attach that number to all sorts of other world leaders and events, and we're just really good at breaking codes and finding patterns. And so you're going to find that number if you really try. Sometimes you have to do some more mental gymnastics than others. But if it's an individual, Nero Caesar is a pretty good bet. There was also this legend that had come up around Nero Caesar that he had died, but maybe he didn't actually die. He had just gone off to amass some forces and he was going to come back. And so the fact that the beast is described as having a mortal wound but being healed from it would have maybe elicited some of those fears. So widespread persecution of Christians didn't really happen for the first couple hundred years, but there were localized moments of intense persecution. Nero Caesar was insane. He burned Rome and then blamed the Christians. He was known for taking Christians and crucifying them and setting them up around a pavilion and then lighting them on fire to light his dinner parties. And if you had lived through the terror of Nero Caesar, it would have made sense that you would have been frightened if this legend had appeared that he was maybe coming back. And so John might be playing on some of those fears in these images. I would still then take that more symbolically, not to think that John thought Nero was actually going to be reincarnated, but that whoever was going to come in the name of the beast would elicit the same sort of fear and terror and persecution as Nero Caesar. And so if the mark of the beast applies to a man, Nero Caesar, pretty good bet. There's another, more recently, but I'm more and more convinced, is that we should actually not try to turn this into a code, but use this as a symbol. And the symbol actually makes a lot of sense given this context. We have this anti-trinity, and the number 6 is 1 less than 7. 7 is that number of completeness, the number of days of creation. 6 is 1 less than complete. And so 6 3 times, 1, 2, 3, would be a good capture of an anti-Trinitarian number. It's 1 less than complete 3 times. It's also on the day that humanity was created, and so maybe it has this sense of fallen humanity. Humanity that's not been fully perfected is the number 6, where 7 would be a more perfected number. And so, and then I said this in the last video, but there's one little note that in the Greek it's a little ambiguous, for it is the number of a man. This word a, this article, is not actually present in the Greek. If he meant a specific human being, he would have put the article the. It's the article of the man, and if he was for sure meaning Nero Caesar, he could have just put the. But you could read this as it is the number of a man general, or just of man, of mankind, of humanity. It's the human number. And so it's this idea that the number itself is fallen humanity. Now, I wanted to get to the application of all of this. How do you read, listen, and keep this strange number? And it says that the whole thing that's going on is that those who have the mark can buy or sell in the marketplace. So to worship the beast, who it's ruling the world, but not just the human ruler, it's the forces of evil that's invigorating and filling that human ruler. And so in whatever empire or system that you find yourself in, whether it be a group or a job or an empire or a government, if they are tending toward, say, tyranny, they're going to be filled and invigorated by the spirit of the beast. And so any tyrant is lording it over the people in that kind of manner. And if they're going to come forth and say the only way that you can make your living, the only way you can have a place in the marketplace is by first worshiping the beast, that would be full-on tyranny. And really the choice then becomes, do I acquiesce and compromise with tyranny, or do I choose what looks like famine? Do I potentially put my whole family at risk, because if I don't take the mark of the beast, I'm going to starve? I can't set up my booth in the marketplace. I can't go and buy goods at the marketplace. Where am I going to get what I need to survive? And so all of the code breaking and trying to figure out what would be the mark of the beast in today's economy and today's world, it has to be more than a microchip or just the fact that the number 666 shows up on something. It's not a barcode. It would have to be completely linked with this idea of worship. If the Caesar is saying you have to worship me before you can go to the marketplace, so it's worship plus economy is about this number. And when I started to connect that, then it actually becomes incredibly practical. because I can imagine the conversation around the dinner table over and over in multiple different ways. And so let's say you're at a dead-end job that has a very tyrannical, toxic environment, and your choice is to speak out for the truth and to uphold your value, or just put your head down and try to keep your paycheck. And you might find that you want to compromise and say, I'm going to stay here even though it's killing me from the inside out because I have to put food on the table. And so you're choosing between what seems like tyranny or famine. Or with the government, if they actually did get to a place where they said you have to worship in this particular way, this particular God, or else you can't make your ends meet in the world. You could imagine, I could imagine a lot of early Christians making this compromise to say, well, I don't really worship Caesar. I don't really believe that Caesar is Lord, but I have to acquiesce, and I'll just pay my dues. I'll give that incense. I'll say this prayer to Caesar so that I can go and set up my booth in the marketplace. And I'll cross my fingers behind my back. We actually know in Roman history that this happened at different times. And so under the Emperor Domitian in the late 80s, under the Emperor Decius in the 250s, and then a little bit later Diocletian, one of the first real systematic persecutions of Christians in the last part of the 280s to early 300s AD. And they actually set up in different ways, sometimes forced and sometimes official and sometimes more just peer pressure, but there was this need to worship Caesar as God before you could actually go into the marketplace. And so the connection of worship and economy was very intimately linked. And there's even evidence that sometimes they actually did, when you offered incense to the Caesar, they gave you a little mark on your hand or a little slip of paper saying, you're an upstanding citizen, you worshiped the right way, go ahead and sell your goods. And so you can imagine the compromise that the Christians would have felt to say, well, I just have to put food on my table, so I'm going to acquiesce even though I don't really believe Caesar is God. Because the alternative is I can't put food on my table, or even worse, they're going to put me in prison or kill me. And now see how incredibly practical that makes this, because now John is drawing a very clear line in the sand. He's saying it's not worth it. Do not worship the beast. Do not compromise your faith. Do not compromise your values. Speak the truth and stand firm. And even if it means famine, trust in the Lord. Don't trust in the beast. Trust in Jesus. Take his mark, not the beast's mark. Like, there's endless ways, I think, throughout the ages that we could apply this then. Every single way, every businessman, businesswoman trying to make a living in the world. How many times are we tempted to compromise the values of our faith to make a few extra bucks in the world? How many times are we compromising with our family in the public sphere? And really, you could say, especially in this symbolic way, I find this is incredibly challenging, because every single day I can ask myself, is this decision taking the mark of the beast? Or am I staying true to my faith in Jesus? I want to end with one last, maybe pastoral idea. It struck me earlier this week that the mark that the beast gives you is a number, 666. But as you look for what does it mean to be sealed, the 140,000 back in chapter 7, you see this actually at multiple times throughout Revelation. But the sealing of the saints of God is not a number, it's a name. God puts a new name on their forehead. And we talked about this in a previous video, but ultimately it's the name of Jesus. He puts his own name on his children, on these saints that he has sealed and set apart. And what a great contrast here, because it's this distorted parallel. The beast looks like the Trinity, even puts a mark on its followers, and yet it's distorted and different because Jesus puts this personal, intimate name on the foreheads of those who are saved. He says, I have called you out by name. You are my son, you are my daughter, and you get a name in my kingdom. And the beast gives you a number. And how often are the decisions that we make to compromise with the world, to choose tyranny or famine or or any other sorts of compromise that we might have in work, in business, in politics, in family. John is maybe even giving this hint here by saying, when you choose the beast, you just become another number. But when you choose Jesus, you get a new name, and you are restored as a son and a daughter of the King. It's this intimate family versus this cog in the wheel, in the machine of the beast.